A slideshow. Title slide, Office of Dietary Supplements Seminar Series. ods.od.nih.gov. NIH, National Institutes of Health Office of Dietary Supplements. Barbara Sorkin appears on a video call at the top right-hand corner of the slideshow.
Welcome, everyone. This is the first U.S. National Institutes of Health ODS Office of Dietary Supplements seminar for the 2023-2024 academic year. I am Barbara Sorkin. In addition to moderating ODS's seminars, I co-direct the NIH Consortium Advancing Research on Botanicals and Other Natural Products. Before I introduce today's speaker, a few brief announcements. First, the coming attractions. Our next ODS webinar will be given by Dr. Lukasz Czesla at 11 a.m. U.S. Eastern Time on Wednesday, October 11th. The title for his seminar is Dietary Supplements and Neurological Resilience in Aging. 2, if you're not on our seminar mailing list and you'd like to be, please see the chat. The icon for that should be at the bottom far right of your screen. We'll be putting an email address in there that you can use to request to be added to our seminars mailing list. Next, some webinars logistics. In the interests of audio quality, we are muting you all as you enter the, all right, and how do I forward? My slides are not forwarding.
Slide, ODS Event Guidelines. A link and a bullet point list. https://ods.od.nih.gov/about/ods_event_guidelines.aspx.
There we go. We've muted you all on entry, and we ask that you stay muted unless Dr. Welch asks for questions until the final question and answer period. You do have access to the chat, and we encourage you to put any questions that you have for the speaker in the chat as they arise. If I see any that seem really urgent, I'll try to get her attention and ask them, interrupt with them. Otherwise, we'll take as many as we can fit at the end of her presentation. And please also use the chat if you're having technical problems with the webinar audio or visual or the closed captions, and we will try to help you with that. And now I have the pleasure, and I do want to call, I do want to call your attention to our etiquette rules. In order for everyone to have an opportunity to ask questions and to hear the seminar, we ask that you all keep your behavior professional.
Slide, Office of Dietary Supplements Seminar Series. Text, any opinions expressed by ODS seminar speakers or attendees do not necessarily reflect the views of the National Institutes of Health, the Department of Health and Human Services, or the United States government.
So with that, it is my pleasure to introduce today's speaker. And today's speaker is Dr. Cara Welch. She is the director of the Office of Dietary Supplement Programs at our sister agency, the Food and Drug Administration. I was really interested to learn that Dr. Welch earned her Ph.D. at Rutgers looking at African plants used in traditional healing. I hope that's correct. In between that and now, she has, in addition to that academic stint, she worked as Senior Vice President of the Office of Scientific and Regulatory Affairs at the Natural Products Association, so in industry. And she has been at the Food and Drug Administration in various roles since 2014, working as the Acting Special Assistant to the Deputy Commissioner for Policy, Legislation, and International Affairs on food policy issues before joining the Center for Food Safety and Applied Nutrition, and now most recently becoming the director of the Office of Dietary Supplement Programs. And we are thrilled to have Cara give us some updates on the Office of Dietary Supplement Programs at Food and Drug Administration, not to be confused with the NIH Office of Dietary Supplements.
Cara Welch appears on the video call.
All right, thank you, Barbara. Do my best here.
Slide, updates from the FDA Office of Dietary Supplement Programs. Cara Welch, Ph.D. NIH ODS 2023 to 2024 Seminar Series. September 13, 2023.
And hopefully everyone sees the video. All right, I am not the best at checking chat during the presentation, so
I've got you, Cara. I'm watching.
Thank you. I am so delighted to be here today, and thank you, Barbara and Stefan, for the invite. I didn't realize that this was the first webinar in the series. Wonderful that we're to this point again, sort of kicking off another year. Yes, my research many moons ago was at Rutgers University. I worked for Jim Simon, and we worked on my research, at least, was largely on Combretum micranthum or Kinkoliba from Senegal. So I can tell you, I think I can still remember at least all sorts of interesting information about Kinkoliba. I haven't seen it come across my desk yet in my current role, but I am waiting for that day, and it will be exciting for me and probably only me.
Slide, FDA organization. A hierarchy diagram of 8 programs in the Food and Drug Administration, with ODSP at the bottom. Text, fda.gov.
So yes, thank you all. I am going to provide a pretty wide-ranging talk today. I wasn't really sure my audience and sort of your familiarity. Obviously, I know my ODS colleagues, and some of the first few slides will be quite boring for you, so my apologies. But I found it really good to start off with FDA. We're a Dietary Supplement program sits in FDA. Sort of about our framework, the regulatory framework, and then sort of move into the meat of the talk of how we regulate the marketplace. I do have a tendency to run long, so I'm going to do my best to stay on time. And I'm sitting here on a boring slide, so let's go ahead and talk about FDA organization. And this is just to sort of give an idea of where the program sits within the broader Food and Drug Administration. Within the Center for Food Safety and Applied Nutrition, or CFSAN, is ODSP. And this makes sense. Dietary supplements statutorily are a category of foods by law. But more than that, there's really a dietary supplements are supplementing the diet. Many of the ingredients in dietary supplements we find in conventional foods and vice versa. So it makes sense that we sit in the Center for Food Safety and Applied Nutrition.
Slide, proposed Human Foods Program Organization Chart. A hierarchy diagram consisting of the Department of Health and Human Services, Food and Drug Administration Human Foods Program at the top, the Commissioner of Food and Drugs below it, and 13 programs on the 3 rows below the Commissioner.
And I could give you more on the structure of CFSAN, but FDA recently announced that we are reorganizing, and I shouldn't say reorganizing CFSAN. We're actually proposing sort of bringing together CFSAN, existing center, an existing Office of Food Policy and Response, and some aspects of our Office of Regulatory Affairs, and sort of bringing them together into a single unified human foods program. And so that's the picture on the screen right now is bringing together a reimagined human foods program and what it will look like. And so whatever you know about CFSAN may very well be looking like this or something similar to this in about a year or so, 6 months to a year. So this is the proposal that was shared a couple months ago, and you can see in this human foods program, dietary supplements are part of this broader Office of Food Chemical Safety, Dietary Supplements and Innovation. And from my perspective, that it's a natural fit. I think sort of you can use food chemicals as a term, or we can talk about sort of food ingredients, and all the chemicals we find in conventional foods are very much similar to the ingredients and the chemicals we find in dietary supplements. And sort of the work that our collective programs are bringing innovative new ingredients to conventional foods and dietary supplements. It makes a natural sense to sort of closely affiliate those programs. So this is the proposal. we'll see as it moves along, sort of what structure will be applied to this, what sort of subsequent structure, I mean. And, it goes through many layers of review. FDA is an agency of Human Health and Human Services, HHS. So HHS and additional reviews before it gets implemented. And again, a reorganization of this magnitude takes time, and even once the structure is in place, sort of letting things settle out. But ideally, what we see going forward is really sort of a collective human foods program and dietary supplements thoroughly integrated into the program.
Slide, Dietary Supplement Authorities. A bullet point list.
So structurally, and now sort of talking about statutorily, FDA's authorities to regulate dietary supplements, and they come from the Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act. We talk a lot about DSHEA, the Dietary Supplement Health and Education Act of 1994, that established the framework for dietary supplements, the essential framework as a distinct commodity within the broader category of foods. But there have been subsequent changes, and so I prefer to talk about sort of regulating supplements under the Act, the Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act, not just DSHEA. In 2006, we have the requirement to report serious adverse events to FDA. Allergen labeling came about for all of foods, including dietary supplements. And then in 2011, sort of a major overhaul of the foods framework with the Food Safety Modernization Act. And while dietary supplements have some modified requirements, or in some cases are exempted, by and large, FSMA affects supplements as well. So all of these things together and another assorted changes sort of give us the framework for regulating dietary supplements.
Slide, Dietary Supplement Authorities. A bullet point list.
DSHEA specifically, I said, sort of laid out the commodity or the requirements for supplements as a distinct commodity. It started by defining what is a dietary supplement. And oddly enough, I spent a fair bit of time thinking about that. DSHEA established requirements for a pre-market review of certain new dietary ingredients, or NDIs. That is the only pre-market review aspect we have for supplements. It established the requirements for GMPs, or good manufacturing practices. A big area for supplements. It allowed structure function claims for supplements, claims for a supplement or its ingredients and how it affects the structure or function of the body. So speaking very broadly, claims that a product affects the structure or function of the body usually was for medical products, but dietary supplements sort of carved out certain structure function claims separate from disease claims. And so I think anyone who's sort of done research in supplements or frankly shopped for supplements are aware that there's a lot of emphasis placed on the marketing and the claims that are attached to a dietary supplement. And then DSHEA established supplement-specific adulteration and misbranding provisions, establishing what is an unsafe dietary supplement, I guess, and when is it appropriate for FDA to remove a product from the market for safety reasons. That's what I mean when I talk about the adulteration provisions and misbranding, the labeling requirements. And then, of course, for my colleagues in ODS, DSHEA established ODS as an office. So y'all were in office almost 30 years ago, long before my office existed.
Slide, Definition of Dietary Supplement. A bullet point list. Text, see Section 201, FF, of the FD&C Act.
So defining a dietary supplement. And as I mentioned, I do spend a fair bit of time sort of focused in on this. And some of the questions that Barbara sent in advance sort of touched on this topic as well. But it's really important as we proceed, as we regulate the market, a product comes across our desk. It's really important to understand first if it is a supplement, do the supplement requirements apply to this product? And so we do have to understand sort of the guardrails for our commodity. And so a supplement is the basics of what is a supplement are on the screen. The statutory text has more detail, of course, but we're looking for a product that is intended to supplement the diet. It should not replace conventional foods or the diet. It must be intended for ingestion. Sublinguals and topicals and inhaled products, those are not ingested, and thus not a supplement. A dietary supplement must contain one or more dietary ingredients. And the text is here on the screen. Some of these are pretty clear: vitamin, mineral, botanical, amino acid, a dietary substance for use by man to supplement the diet. It's quite a mouthful there. From my perspective, a dietary substance or a substance of the diet, we're looking at ingredients that are in the human diet. So sort of first pass, if it's an ingredient in food, then it can be an ingredient in supplements, which again makes perfect sense. And then not really a catch-all, but sort of taking those essential ingredients and then saying anything that makes up those ingredients, like a concentrate, a metabolite, a constituent extracts, or combination of all those previous ingredients are also dietary ingredients. And then a dietary supplement cannot include certain drug ingredients. And again, there's additional detail to be had, but at sort of the highest level, if a substance is a drug, is approved as a drug, or is under investigation as a new drug, there are other requirements, before it's ever a food or a dietary supplement, then it's not allowed in dietary supplements. So basically, sometimes it's referred to as a race to market. So was it in foods and supplements first? Then it's still allowed to be in foods and supplements. And we know ingredients exist in both drug and supplement world. If it's a drug first, then it's not allowed as a supplement. And so again, this may come up later on today, and we can certainly sort of provide additional clarification as needed.
Slide, Dietary Supplement Adulteration Provisions. A bullet point list. Text, see Section 402, F, of the FD&C Act.
But I also mentioned the adulteration provisions. This sort of lays out the safety standard for dietary supplements and what is expected for a safe dietary supplement. There are, this is under Section 402F of the Act. It's down in the bottom corner of the slide. But there's sort of 4 categories. F1A, so A on the screen, presents a significant or unreasonable risk of illness or injury. That's pretty serious, of course. F1B is, again, a bit of a mouthful, but it's an adulteration provision specifically for new dietary ingredients, or NDIs, those ingredients that are just coming to market. And there, the burden is a little, well, it's higher on the safety margin. It's lower for FDA to demonstrate it's unsafe. But for a new dietary ingredient, we're looking for an ingredient for which there's inadequate information to present a reasonable assurance that it does not present a significant or unreasonable risk of illness or injury. I know the language is very confusing, but essentially is inadequate information that that it doesn't present a safety concern. So it is a slightly different evaluation for new dietary ingredients as opposed to all other dietary, or any dietary ingredient, I guess. And then there's 2 more. For C on the screen, the Secretary of HHS has the ability to declare an ingredient an imminent hazard, excuse me. This has not been done, and to be very clear, that is a very high burden for FDA, because, well, frankly, FDA can't do it. That is only the Secretary can do that. And then D on the screen actually refers back to a food adulteration provision. So if it's adulterated under 402A1, then we would probably look to D on the screen. But something that's very important for the adulteration provision, and this was important in DSHEA, is that supplements are given the expectation of safety, and so the burden sort of rests with FDA to demonstrate a product is unsafe or meets one of these adulteration provisions, and that's very clear. It's written in the statute. So if we are to bring an argument, it's our burden to demonstrate that that a dietary supplement is adulterated under one of these items.
Slide, regulatory responsibilities. 2 bullet point lists, titled pre-market and post-market.
Regulatory responsibilities, and this is mostly for visual perspective, but I've tried to sort of distill down the regulatory responsibilities, and these are very rough categories, into sort of the basics of bringing a product to market. Where do the regulatory responsibilities lie, so to speak? And the visual aspect is that it's much heavier on the post-market side of things. So pre-market and facility registration, you have to register a food facility, and that's a requirement under the Bioterrorism Act. It's facility specific. And I mentioned before, DSHEA established a requirement for NDI, or new dietary ingredient notification. That's the only pre-market aspect, pre-market opportunity for FDA to review new dietary ingredients, the safety and the identity of what's expected to be coming to market. Much more of it is on the post-market side of things. And so I have listed GMPs, good manufacturing practices. That's the manufacturing requirements specific to producing a high quality, consistent product. The labeling requirements, there's a lot of labeling requirements, food and supplement labeling requirements. I mentioned earlier claims. There is a requirement to notify FDA of structure function claims that you're using. When a manufacturer uses a new claim for their product, their requirement is to notify FDA within 30 days of using that claim. So it's actually a post-market notification. And then adverse event reporting, right? If a dietary supplement brand is aware of an adverse event, a serious adverse event associated with their product, they are required to notify FDA, or to tell FDA, and they have to fill out information, and so that is, so basically the visual representation here is that it's our opportunity with products is much more on the post-market side of things.
Slide, landscape, a bullet point list.
Building a case here. I'm going to talk about some of the landscape for dietary supplements. So DSHEA was enacted in 1994, 29 years ago. And in those 29 years, it has, the marketplace has really sort of exploded. Largely in a positive way, right? We have massive growth of sales. I have 50 billion on the screen. I think that's quite low. I've seen estimates of 60 billion or 65 billion, and sort of estimating in the future even higher. And then talking about the number of products, we estimated about 4,000 products back in 1994. Best guess for today, and to be clear, I am aware this is low. The number that I've been using is 95,000, and thanks to my ODS colleagues, I actually get this directly from the Dietary Supplement Label database. So sort of looking at the label database, looking at the number of products on market, sort of filtering out on market versus off market. Last year it was 95. It was just over 95,000. I was chatting with a colleague the other day and did another search, and it was 103,000. So I can already update this number, but we know that number isn't all the products out there. So we are well aware that this number is low. And I think this obviously setting the stage for future conversation, sort of understanding the marketplace that we regulate. But more than just a bigger market, it's a different market. 1994, since that point, we've certainly seen sort of a globalization of the supply chain. and the introduction of the internet as a retail and distribution channel. 1994 was just pre-internet, and so you can tell that when you read the statute. It refers to some of the references are really sort of talking about brick and mortar sales, and obviously today, I think internet. I'm not sure. I don't have an estimate of what percent of sales is internet versus sort of in person, but hazard a guess, it's pretty high. And so things have certainly changed with using the internet as a distribution channel. We also see the products are quite different. We're talking dietary supplements today. Many of them are precisely formulated products, and you're using complex mixtures, sometimes more than one complex mixture, or designer compounds, many of which are new. And they're very, again, sort of, they require quite consistent and quality processes to produce good products. And so it's not really what I understood, the 1994 market to be looking like. It's definitely evolved since that point. And we also know that 75% of Americans report taking dietary supplements. So our responsibility as a public health agency in protecting consumers and ensuring a safe marketplace this is exactly why we do it. The 75% of Americans that take these products.
Slide, challenges. A bullet point list.
So I wanted to sort of, I was clearly building up to a story here and sort of bringing it all together. Some of the challenges that my office faces and as we regulate the marketplace. And I already mentioned this, but largely our oversight is dependent on post-market surveillance. There is essentially no barrier to bringing a product to market, and there's no need to tell FDA. In most cases, there's no need to tell FDA when you're introducing a product to the market, or pulling it off and reformulating it and putting it back on. So there's no pre-market approval, and to be clear, we agree with that. We don't want pre-market approval. There's limited pre-market review. It's really just those certain NDIs that are that haven't first been in the food supply. And so sort of getting an understanding of what is the marketplace is quite difficult. FDA, we do a lot of inspections, right? I mean, we have an entire inspectorate, Office of Regulatory Affairs at FDA. And, we're inspecting facilities and sort of gathering information on the marketplace and the quality of the products that are being put out. But our inspectional resources are, of course, constrained. I mean, there's only so many investigators we have. And so, I talked about the size of the marketplace and number of products. We can also talk about sort of the size of the industry in facilities, or I don't have good information on brands, but even sort of the facilities that make these products. And there is a requirement to register with the FDA. My understanding is, we're aware of probably around 10,000 facilities. I'm not sure how accurate that number is. Last year, in 2022, I apologize, I don't have 2023 numbers. We're just closing out that fiscal year. But in fiscal year 2022, our agency did 500 dietary supplement inspections. So that's 500 facilities. Compared to 10,000, we're looking at a pretty small percentage. And so I think that's something we just need to keep in mind is how do we get sort of the best coverage to ensure we're giving the right oversight. And then I also mentioned, no barrier to bringing a product to market. FDA has no systematic way to know when a new product is coming onto the market or what it contains. The DSLD is a great resource, but we know it's not complete. There are other resources out there. Even sort of scrolling through the e-commerce platforms, and that is a lot of what we do. But that's us sort of scrounging for information, and so again, sort of setting the stage for the next few bits of information.
Slide 3 quotes from Dr. Robert Califf.
So those are the challenges. A lot of what it sort of boils down to is, from my perspective, is having data on the industry, having data on the marketplace, and then applying it to sort of the best use of our resources. This is some quotes from FDA Commissioner Dr. Califf that I have seen sort of applying to at least my work in regulating the marketplace. I'm gonna keep up with my time here. Sometimes the two bottom ones are specifically when he was talking about dietary supplements. But Dr. Califf is big on data and having that data in hand. I think usually he's actually talking about big data, but even sort of understanding what are we looking at, how can we ensure we have the right information to prioritize our resources, to make these calls, to ensure consumers have the information they need. That all sort of fits together. We've had some great support from FDA leadership on sort of modernizing our program. And his two quotes here are talking about exactly that, like how can we modernize the dietary supplement oversight? And we've had great support on very specific statutory changes that we think are important. And he talks about in February 2023, we believe dietary supplements should be required to list the products with FDA. And that sort of helps us understand, the marketplace, what we're regulating, how we can best use our resources, how we can make that impact. And then, the second quote talking about having information available about dietary supplements, and sort of applying that forward. What are the tools we have in place? What are the tools we need? Again, sort of the best use of our resources moving forward.
Slide, programmatic priorities, a bullet point list.
And this all sort of comes together, ideally our programmatic priorities are sort of advancing in that same direction. We're largely looking for, what information do we need to gather? What information do we need to sort of put out? And how can we be very intentional in the information we're gathering, how we're using it, how we're sharing it, making sure we're informed decision making, ensuring consumers have the information they need. So these are my programmatic priorities. This is sort of what my office is working on in very large buckets. I'd mentioned before our desire for modernized statutory authorities. I'm not sure that we can necessarily increase the inspectional coverage all that much, but can we improve the inspectional coverage? How do we then use that to enhance compliance? Strengthening the regulation of new dietary ingredients or NDIs, and sort of pulling it together, informed decision making. And internally, we want to make sure that we're making good use of our resources, and but also externally, our stakeholders. We have obviously industry stakeholders, consumers, healthcare providers. All aspects of our stakeholders. It's important that they have the information they need.
Slide, modernize statutory authorities, a bullet point list.
I'm going to quickly walk through those big buckets and try to wrap up in the next 5-10 minutes. So modernizing statutory authorities, this is something that FDA has been talking about for a few years. Our desire for dietary supplement listing, our desire for the authority to establish a requirement that all supplements, including sort of brand name, the ingredients, and the amounts of each ingredient, is listed with FDA. It would not be an opportunity to take this information, review it, and give an answer before it can be marketed, but really just, as you're bringing a product to market, you send in a notification to FDA, fill out a form, and get the information to us as to what is this product, what does it contain, what are the amounts. That would give us massive amounts of data on the industry, on the marketplace, I should say, and allow us to sort of understand what's the current marketplace we're regulating, how are we seeing it change maybe over time, down the road, and where is the best use of our resources. We're also, we've talked a bit about, what can we do to facilitate enforcement of unlawful products? Obviously, that's a pretty vague term. I don't think anyone would argue with facilitating enforcement of unlawful products, but, ensuring we have the right tools to be able to remove unlawful products from the market. And I think that balance is really important. So I understand, not everyone. I think again, having the right tool and and having the direction of when to use that tool is really important. Maybe is the best way to say it. But then to be clear, that's sort of the extent of what FDA has proposed. But we're aware, DSHEA again is coming on to middle-aged at this point. We're almost 30 years down the road. Are there other clarifications or improvements? We've now seen sort of how DSHEA plays out over several decades. Are there ways to make it better? And maybe there aren't. But I think that's sort of the input we would be happy to engage with regulated industry, with Capitol Hill, and ensuring we have the right structure. I think it's important, does that all of our stakeholders end up with a strong marketplace, right? FDA needs the tools to regulate, industry needs sort of the structure and the framework to put products out, and consumers need to be sure that these products are safe and high quality and properly regulated.
Slide, improve inspectional coverage. A bullet point list.
I talked a bit about inspections, and I'm actually using the term very broadly here. I'm not just saying facility inspections, but I think we want to make sure that we are, there's sort of a volume here. And I think it's not so much, doing more, and more, but are we doing the right inspections? Are we sampling and testing the right products? Are we making an impact with the product sampling? Can we do something with that information? Imports are, I think, an area where I think we definitely want to do more. And we hear from industry the desire for us to do more. Products coming into the market, into the US market. Do we have the information we need? Do we have the system set up where we can identify what these products are? And, in situations where they are not appropriate for the US marketplace, stop them from coming in. And third-party programs. Again, this is sort of a nod to what I've heard from some of our stakeholders, but there's a lot of strong third-party programs out there. Again, the supplement industry, regulated industry, has is coming on to 30 years here. I think there's some really strong programs out there. Is there an opportunity for FDA to partner's a strong word. I don't know that I want to use that, but what information could we glean from these third-party programs to make all of us more effective? So a lot of this is, stuff to continue to look at in the future. We want to continue to be better with our, again, inspectional, in a very broad term, inspectional resources.
Slide, enhance compliance. A bullet point list.
Enhancing compliance. I think this is, again, something everyone can get behind. We want to, what can we do to be confident that we have a largely compliant marketplace? I think a lot of this actually, we can absolutely take responsibility for a lot of this. How can we communicate about our risk prioritization, sort of the risks that we see, the risks that we're focusing on? Can we communicate and be transparent on the areas of our program that we are prioritizing? Doesn't mean we're ignoring other aspects, but maybe we need to put distinct resources towards 2 or 3 things, and continue to let the other things work. But can we be more communicative about how we're using our resources and where? I really want to, I am in the midst of some sort of internal conversations to strategize effective enforcement. We have situations where FDA puts forward a lot of resources to explain a certain product or a certain ingredient isn't appropriate for dietary supplements. And are we sort of, is it a successful action? And I think that's really important, that feedback loop to figure out, are we being effective in how we're using our resources? And how can we be more effective? What's working, what's not working? How do we sort of decrease the stuff that's not working and increase the stuff that is working? Again, I think internal processes, but this is something I really want to actively work on. And then again, sort of a vague term here, facilitate others' efforts to strengthen compliance. We are not the only ones here that can make changes. And so, what can we do to help a strong marketplace or a high quality marketplace? Some of the things, we have other partners that have authorities over supplements. So FDA at times will work with FTC, and how can our efforts help them, and or vice versa, their efforts help us. But also, how can we communicate about problems that are problematic? I know that some of our industry colleagues have come out and said, look, this is a problematic product. How can we sort of amplify their message, or vice versa? How can industry amplify our message? Are retailers a source of information, again, to protect consumers? A lot of this is area that I want to sort of look at and see, what options are available, and how can we, again, sort of use our resources in the best way possible.
Slide. Strengthen the regulation of NDIs. A bullet point list.
NDIs. New dietary ingredients. I think there's a fair bit of work that we continue to chip away at with NDIs. From my perspective, I've sort of bundled it under how can we strengthen the regulation of NDIs. Some of it is guidances, and for those in the audience that have listened to me talk, I've talked a lot about NDI guidances over the years, and I really want to make some progress. I think it's really important that we continue to work on guidance for NDIs, clarifying the expectations for NDI notifications. We proposed, I call it an amnesty. We proposed an amnesty. It was a draft guidance, proposed it for public comment. Is there an opportunity for NDIs that should have been notified and were not? Can we sort of open up a window where those never filed NDIs could get filed without sort of fear of repercussion for that fact that they didn't file it pre-market? I think that's an opportunity, again, to sort of get information on the NDIs. I am looking for the identity and safety information. I'm not as worried about the fact that it, maybe is a year or 10 years too late. I want to know, is it, again, are we talking about something that, do we understand the safety of it? Do we understand the identity of it? So getting that information on the ingredients is really important. And all this sort of pulled together, ideally, will facilitate enforcement. And I think that's something we hear from our stakeholders, absolutely. Having a strong NDI or NDI notification program relies on strong enforcement. And so what can we do on our end of things to hold up our end of the bargain there?
Slide. Informed decision-making. A bullet point list.
The last item is on informed decision-making. I think there's a few things that fit under informed decision-making. Some of it is, again, sort of improving transparency and communication. I mentioned that earlier. I'm sort of bringing it back here because I think that all helps with, ensuring manufacturers and have the information they need on ingredients that, maybe they shouldn't be using. Retailers have information on ingredients they shouldn't be selling. Consumers can understand, really educated consumers can understand what what has FDA said about X, Y, or Z? Healthcare professionals, what are they recommending? Do they understand dietary supplements and how dietary supplements are different than foods and drugs? Some of it is on that note, increasing education. We put out about a year and a half ago an educational campaign called Supplement Your Knowledge, and really trying to sort of raise the base level for consumers, for healthcare professionals, even high school students, on their basic levels of dietary supplement knowledge. Is there opportunities for sort of increasing that level of information, level of knowledge, excuse me. The importance of reporting adverse events to FDA. We talk a lot at FDA about misinformation. So is there an opportunity where we can combat some of the misinformation about supplements? All of this sort of under the umbrella of informed decision making.
Slide, thank you. Cara Welch, Ph.D. Director, Office of Dietary Supplement Programs, CFSAN, FDA. ODSP@fda.hhs.gov.
That is a breeze through dietary supplement. I know that I just covered a lot, and I am seeing the chat number rise. So hopefully Barbara has figured out a fantastic way to group these questions together. Do you want me to stop sharing? Okay.
Yes.
The slideshow disappears. Barbara reappears on the video call.
I think we can see us. Oh, see me. Wonderful. So Cara, thank you. You are very much on time with lots of time for the great many questions. Thank you, audience, you have been putting into the chat. And I will start with picking up on what you just said about communications, Cara, because that's something that we talk a lot about in your sister office over here at NIH, Office of Dietary Supplements. And maybe this is something that we can begin discussing at our joint meetings can we join forces on this? Because this is a kind of education that we're also really interested in. Mm-hmm. And with that, yeah, if you want to respond to that, otherwise, while I'm scrolling back to the first question that I wanted to ask you from the chat.
You find the question. I think the communication aspect is, it's going to be a change for FDA. As a regulatory agency, I think our inclination is to keep things very close to the chest, but there are absolutely opportunities to be more transparent. And so ensuring that, we do our best to identify those opportunities. At times I have some of our partners coming to us and saying, you should have told us about this. And absolutely. There are times when I need to be told that as well. I will say, ODS, the information that ODS puts out, we use a lot. And so sometimes FDA is not able to say something on a particular ingredient or product and the use of an ingredient. But that's exactly why ODS was established, right? To advise the secretary, but also to advise everyone on the use of supplements. The ODS fact sheets, just a quick plug for ODS fact sheets, are fantastic. We refer to them all the time at FDA. When someone comes to us and says, X ingredient or X product used for Y use, if there's a fact sheet, we are 100% directing them to ODS's fact sheets. I already mentioned my love, at least of the DSLD. I spend a fair bit of time scrolling through. If there's a question that's sort of on the prevalence of a product or the prevalence of an ingredient, that's one of my first sources is, and then of course, even, the number of products in the market. Even realizing we all agree it's an incomplete list, but it's something and it's out there and it's public and the labels are right there. Great resource. So love to partner more on those.
Thank you from my ODS colleagues. And maybe it makes sense to also mention that Operation Supplement Safety from DOD.
Yes.
Yeah. Another source.
Another strong partner for us. Andrea is great about flagging things for us. But again, sort of the opportunities that we can partner, I think the big picture goal is very much the same, ensuring safe products, protecting consumers. We might go about it slightly differently. We often have more of a stick approach, but that's okay. I mean, someone needs to be there with the stick. I think, again, sort of utilizing our resources, relying on each other, all of this sort of fits together.
Let me start on the many questions in the chat. And the first one I'm going to give you is, if something has been approved as a drug outside of the United States, I think, for example, of reishi or turkey tail, can it be considered as a new dietary ingredient in the US?
Yes. I mean, I think my answer is yes, with the caveat of, I mentioned about when a drug ingredient is not allowed in a supplement. That specifically, the statutory text, and I did not include that, I just included a reference to it, specifically mentions FDA's authority to approve a new drug. So it references Section 505. So it is talking about drugs approved under the US drug regime.
I think that will answer that question. Thank you. And then the next question is a big one from Doug Kalman. How do you define unreasonable risk for a dietary ingredient?
So great question. Probably too much for this, but also I'm not sure that I am the right person to speak about this. I'm a chemist by training. I think the basics for toxicological review and assessment is very much consistent as we within FDA sort of apply it to our statutory framework. What can we support the use of a product presenting a significant or an unreasonable risk of illness or injury. There's not a lot of text out there, but there is some information sort of digging into this topic. And I would be remiss not to mention, I don't think we need to always hold up the ephedra rule as sort of the only way we can do it. But FDA did put forward a regulation where we explain that ephedrine alkaloids, it's not all ephedra, it's ephedrine alkaloids present a significant or unreasonable risk of illness or injury. The preamble to that rule, admittedly, I have not read it recently, but that provides some of our thinking for that situation. That is not the only situation, but that I think is a great resource sort of within that context.
There are a number of questions about structure function claims that I think also speak, and really I think the take home from those is that those are available online, but they're really difficult to share, to search if you're looking for something specific. And I think this is aligned with a lot of questions in the chat about, you're talking about modernization and making at least the Office of Dietary Supplement Programs more user-friendly. And I know I've heard this about filing adverse event claims, that it's a barrier, that there's a time investment required that's a barrier to many of them getting funded, for example, by emergency department personnel who are overwhelmed as it is. Is that something that you're hoping to be able to address?
The structure function claims that have been submitted to FDA, I think yes, I'm not sure the comments or the chat, I haven't opened that box yet. I think there's an astute observation first. Yes, they can be hard to sort of scroll through. I admit I'm not sure that I have an answer as to, are we looking to make it more user-friendly? But I think we want to pose that to my staff to sort of dig through and see sort of the risk benefit, maybe poor use of those terms, but the pros and cons of doing so. We for many years, we received them, we review them. If we have a problem, we will deal with that one in sort of direct communication, and then put it publicly available in regulations.gov, the docket, the public docket. But it's not particularly user-friendly. It is easier. It might be easier now that we have an electronic portal for submission. But I think that's something I would probably just want to sort of refer to my staff for a deeper dive on that. Adverse event reporting, Barbara, to your point, that is something that we continue to work on. I think it's such an important area to keep digging in of how, at a very high level, how do we make it easier for medical professionals to report adverse events? A really thorough adverse event, even one, can give us what we need for action. But we need to give them the time. We need to sort of reduce the burdens, the whatever the barrier is, to get them to report. Because we've heard that, we've explored some things, and I think it's something that we continue to work on. And to be clear, I hear that top down as well. I know FDA leadership feels the same way. How do we ensure that we make it as easy as possible for medical professionals or our military partners? Can we sort of make it easier for them to report adverse events? Once they come in, FDA has been sort of publicly posting them in it's not particularly user-friendly, but in sort of a large file. I think we aim for about quarterly. We will post all adverse events that have been submitted to our system. It's broader than just supplements. It's supplements, foods, and cosmetics, but that information is there. It's publicly available. You can dig through it. Or of course, requesting records, specific records through FOIA, the Freedom of Information Act requests.
Yeah, FOIA, of course, is a process and doesn't give you information quickly. But yeah, that's great that you're looking at all of those things. I think that's exciting. There's a question also from Dr. Kalman. Could you comment on when FDA has a 483 finding whereby a company was found not to be CGMP compliant for specifications such as identity, strength, and so forth? Why is only a warning letter given? If the product cannot be identified by the manufacturer by its own testing, does that not give pause for a public health concern? The company manufacturer gets the 483 from FDA data, seems to follow up for, and closeout does not occur. Can FDA do better at enforcing GMPs? And why can you not use your authority to push against companies that fail inspections for specifications? And maybe you could start by telling those of us who are not inside or enough what a 483 is.
Sure. Yeah, there's a lot of inside terms there. So good job on asking the question. A 483 is sort of a very inside FDA term. That's the form that a firm will get as we close out an inspection, a facility inspection. And so an inspection is sort of, there are specific rules along with an inspection, right? We issue a document to open the inspection, we issue a document to close it out, and sometimes we have observations in there, and it's written on like number form 483, so we now call it a 483. Those are observations that the investigator, well, I just said observations and observed, but those are things that the investigator observed during the inspection that they feel is out of compliance with the requirement. And I think it's important here to sort of understand an inspection is sort of a moment in time. And I think so there's some context here. An inspection happens, there are observations. Those observations get reviewed by several steps through the agency. The firm has a chance to respond. Do we think that do we think they're actually out of compliance? Do we have the evidence to support that they're out of compliance? And I think the best goal for everyone is when a firm voluntarily comes into compliance. So if we start with a warning letter, the best use of our resources is to tell them these are problems and allow them the opportunity to come into compliance. It's a lot more work to go out and enforce. So it's our general practice to start with a warning letter, a compliance action to bring them into compliance. That's the better use of our resources. If need be, so if we start seeing sort of repeated non-compliance and we feel like it's a systemic issue, that's when we look to more serious steps of enforcement action. Do we need to shut down the firm and join them until they can come into compliance? Those are resource intensive up through the agency. Many offices are involved. And we have to use a Department of Justice resources actually for enforcement actions. So those are pretty resource intensive. So the best use is, can we get them to come into compliance? But again, a valid point. We have limited resources, and getting back to the facilities and the firms, it can be difficult. So I think we're always looking, how can we be better? How can we be more effective? How can we get that impact first time around?
So we are at the hour. We have a couple of options. One, I can certainly forward questions to you, Cara, or if you have a few minutes, we can stay and keep plowing through questions.
So I'm happy to stay on for a couple, but I understand people are not able to. So I will, if you can forward me the comments or the questions, my best to get answers. That will take some time.
Understood. That was fabulous, and thank you so much for your efforts to answer these questions. You've been on board there as director for just a little over a year, so I'm sure it's still a lot going on. And I want to thank the audience too for your engagement and for asking so many questions. And we are getting thank yous for a great webinar, and I agree. So thank you, Cara, Hans, and we really appreciate it. I will save the chat, and it'd be great if, and yes, we will, slides are available. Please email ods@nih.gov if you want a copy of the slides, and we will get it to you. And thank you, everybody. I will try to grab the chat. James, can you grab the chat for me, please, in case I don't? And we will forward those to you, and you will get back to people who are identifiable from the chat information.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Cara. Really appreciate you.
Barbara waves.